I never thought I'd end up posting here, but I honestly don't know what to do with all of this anymore. My wife, 32F, and I, 34M, have been together for 11 years, married for 7. For most of that time, I genuinely believed we were solid. Not perfect, obviously, but stable. We had routines, inside jokes, dumb little traditions like ordering takeout every Friday and arguing over what movie to fall asleep to. Normal couple stuff. But over the last year, something changed in her. And before anyone says, you probably ignored the signs. Trust me, I noticed them. I just kept convincing myself they meant something else. She became weirdly defensive about everything. Like, I'd ask how her day was and she'd snap back with, "Why are you interrogating me?" She started sleeping with her phone face down. Then she changed her password after literally years of us knowing each other's passcodes. Her explanation? People deserve privacy. Okay, fair. I didn't push it. But then the lying started. Small lies at first. Stupid lies. She'd say she was working late, but her coworker would casually mention the office closed early. She'd tell me she was at her sister's place, but her sister once accidentally called while sitting beside me asking where my wife was. Every time I confronted her, she'd act like I was insane. "You're paranoid. You always make things dramatic. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, we wouldn't fight all the time." That last one stuck with me longer than I want to admit. Then came the gym obsession out of nowhere. New clothes, new perfume. Suddenly she cared about things she never cared about before. Again, I know how cliché this sounds. I literally remember thinking, there's no way my life is turning into one of those Reddit stories. And honestly, the worst part wasn't even the distance. It was how cold she became. One night I told her I felt like she hated me lately, and she just shrugged and said, "Maybe I'm tired of carrying this marriage." That sentence messed me up more than I can explain, because I started believing her. I started wondering if I really was the problem. About 2 weeks after that conversation, things got even stranger. She suddenly became nice again, and I don't mean normal nice. I mean suspiciously nice. Bringing me coffee in the morning, randomly hugging me, asking if I wanted to go away for the weekend. It felt forced, like someone following instructions from a relationship podcast. At first I thought maybe we were finally fixing things. Then one Friday night she told me she had a mandatory work dinner. She even rolled her eyes while saying it, like she was annoyed she had to go. She left around 7 p.m. wearing this black dress I'd literally never seen before. Here's the thing that bothered me. She forgot her laptop. If this was supposedly a work event, why leave the thing you always complain you need for work? I noticed it almost immediately, but I still tried to ignore the feeling in my stomach. I told myself I was overthinking again. Around 10 p.m., her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She almost never left it behind. Ever. I stared at it for a solid minute, debating whether to touch it. Part of me already knew crossing that line meant there was no going back. Then it buzzed again. A preview notification popped up from a guy named Eric. No last name. Just, "Can't stop thinking about your legs tonight." I swear to God my entire body went cold. Not angry at first, just numb. I opened the phone because at that point, what was left to protect? Turns out she changed her main passcode, but apparently forgot to lock one of the messaging apps separately. And there it all was. Months of messages, pictures, hotel reservations, inside jokes, complaints about me. The part that destroyed me wasn't even the flirting. It was reading her describe me like I was some pathetic burden she was trapped with. She'd write things like, "He's too emotionally needy. I feel like I'm babysitting him. I can't wait until I'm free." Meanwhile, 3 days earlier, she'd looked me in the eyes and asked if I wanted to renew our lease for another year. That's the kind of thing that rewires your brain. And because apparently the universe enjoys kicking people while they're down, at 10:37 p.m. my front door opened. She walked in laughing at something on her phone, then froze when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table holding hers. I will never forget that look on her face. Not guilt, not shame, calculation. For maybe 3 full seconds, neither of us said anything. She just stood there near the door, still holding her purse, staring at me. and I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in my hand, feeling like my chest had been hollowed out. Then she did something I genuinely didn't expect. She got angry, not nervous, not apologetic. Angry. She stormed over and immediately said, "Why the hell are you going through my phone?" That was her first reaction. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "We need to talk." Not even denial. Just outrage that she got caught. I remember laughing, but it sounded unhinged even to me. I held the phone up and asked, "Who the hell is Eric?" And this woman, this absolute masterclass in lying, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "He's just a friend." I actually thought my brain was going to short-circuit. I started reading messages out loud. The hotel bookings, the photos, the parts where they talked about sleeping together while I was apparently too clueless to notice. Her expression changed instantly after that. She realized denial wasn't going to work anymore. So she switched tactics. Suddenly she was crying. And I mean instantly, like someone flipped a switch. She sat down, covered her face, and started saying things like, "You haven't been emotionally present for years. I felt alone. You pushed me away." It was surreal because half the things she accused me of were things I'd begged her to work on. Then came the part that really shattered me. I asked her how long it had been going on. She hesitated. And that hesitation told me the answer before she even spoke. 8 months. 8 months. Do you know what's crazy? My brain immediately started replaying every memory from those months like some disgusting montage. Our anniversary dinner? She was texting him in the bathroom. The weekend trip to the lake? Apparently she left early one morning to call him. Thanksgiving with my family? She told him she wished she was with him instead. I physically felt sick. At one point I had to run to the bathroom because I genuinely thought I was going to throw up. When I came back out, she was suddenly calm again. Too calm. Then she hit me with this line, "I didn't think you'd actually find out." That sentence changed something in me permanently, because it meant she never planned to stop. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't a mistake. This was a full double life that would have continued if she'd been smarter about hiding it. The next few days were complete chaos. I barely slept. I barely ate. My brain kept bouncing between rage and disbelief every 5 minutes. One second I wanted her out of my life forever. The next I was stupidly asking questions like, "Did you ever actually love me?" And honestly, that's the humiliating part nobody talks about after betrayal. You don't just lose trust in the other person. You lose trust in your own judgment. She stayed in the apartment the first night because it was almost 2 a.m. and neither of us knew what to do. We argued until sunrise. Not screaming the entire time either. Somehow the quieter moments hurt more. At one point I asked her if she loved him. She paused again. Always the pauses. Then she said, "I don't know." That answer hurt worse than if she just said yes. The next morning she acted bizarrely normal. She made coffee. Asked if I wanted breakfast, like we hadn't just detonated our marriage 6 hours earlier. I remember staring at her thinking, "Who even are you?" Then another bomb dropped. Her phone rang while she was in the shower. Eric. She'd saved him under a fake woman's name now, which honestly made me laugh because the damage was already done. I answered. There was silence for maybe 2 seconds before he said, "Is she with you?" Not "Who is this?" Not confusion. Not panic. The guy already knew about me. I told him, "I'm her husband." And this man actually sighed like I was inconveniencing him. Then he said something that made everything even worse. "She told me you guys were basically separated." I felt this horrible sinking feeling in my stomach because suddenly all her lies were colliding into each other. She'd been lying to both of us the entire time. When she came out of the shower and realized I'd answered, she completely lost it. Not because she felt exposed, because I'd crossed a boundary. I swear the mental gymnastics were unbelievable. She started yelling that I was trying to humiliate her, that I was invading her privacy, that I wanted to make her look like a monster. And maybe this sounds dramatic, but that was the exact moment something inside me finally snapped awake. Because for months I'd been twisting myself into knots trying to understand her behavior, trying to fix things, trying to blame myself. Meanwhile, she'd been protecting herself the entire time. Not me, not our marriage, not even the truth, just herself. So I told her to leave. And for the first time since this started, she looked genuinely shocked. She didn't leave right away. Of course she didn't. First she cried again. Then she got angry again. Then she started bargaining like we were negotiating a hostage situation instead of talking about our marriage. You're overreacting. It was complicated. You don't just throw away 11 years. That last one almost made me explode because she had been throwing it away for 8 months already. I told her I needed space. I told her I couldn't even look at her without replaying those messages in my head. And then she said something that still makes my blood boil. So you're just giving up? Giving up. As if I was the one sneaking around hotels and lying every day. Eventually she packed a bag and left for her sister's place. At least that's what she claimed. At that point, I wouldn't have trusted her if she told me the sky was blue. The second the apartment door closed, the silence hit me like a truck. I know this sounds pathetic, but I sat on the kitchen floor for almost an hour just staring at nothing. The apartment suddenly looked different. Every object felt fake somehow, like the life I thought I had was just a movie set. Then came the panic attacks. I'd never had one before, so I genuinely thought something was medically wrong with me. My chest tightened. My hands went numb. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. And because life apparently enjoys stacking disasters, 2 days later I found out there was another lie. Not another affair partner. Money. I logged into our shared savings account because rent was due soon, and nearly $18,000 was gone. Gone. At first I thought maybe I was looking at the wrong account. Then I checked the transfers. Small withdrawals over months. Hidden. Careful enough that I never noticed. When I confronted her over text, she claimed it was for personal expenses and accused me of financially controlling her for asking questions. I cannot explain how insane this whole thing became. Within 72 hours, I went from my marriage is struggling to discovering an affair. Months of manipulation, non-stop lying, and missing money stopped feeling real. My friends started coming over in shifts because they were worried I shouldn't be alone. One of them looked around the apartment and quietly asked, "Dude, how long has she been treating you like this?" And I didn't know how to answer, because once the shock started fading, I began realizing something terrifying. This didn't start with the affair. I'd just been ignoring smaller red flags for years. Looking back now, I think my brain avoided seeing the truth because the alternative was admitting I'd built my entire adult life around someone who didn't respect me. And once that realization starts creeping in, it infects every memory. Little things I used to brush off suddenly looked completely different. Like how she always mocked me during arguments. Not normal couple fighting either, cruel, targeted stuff. If I opened up about being stressed at work, she'd bring it back later to call me weak. If I tried explaining that something she said hurt me, she'd roll her eyes and say I was too sensitive. I kept telling myself that marriage was hard, that all couples go through rough periods. But my friends started telling me things after the separation became public. Things they'd apparently kept quiet about for years. One friend admitted she openly flirted with random guys whenever we went out drinking. Another told me she constantly joked about me when I wasn't around. Apparently she used to call me predictable and safe, like those were insults. Then came the worst conversation. Her sister called me. Now, for context, her sister and I were never especially close, but she sounded genuinely upset. She asked if I was sitting down before she told me this. The affair with Eric wasn't the first one. There had been another guy 3 years ago. Different city, different job, same pattern. According to her sister, my wife confessed it during some drunken breakdown and swore it was a one-time mistake she'd never repeat. I honestly felt numb hearing it. Not even angry anymore. Just empty. Because suddenly my whole marriage timeline shattered. Was any of it real? Which version of her was the real one? The woman who held my hand while my dad was in the hospital? Or the woman secretly sleeping with other men while telling me I was emotionally exhausting? I started obsessing over details after that. Couldn't stop myself. I reread old messages, checked dates, compared photos, It became unhealthy fast. I barely recognized myself anymore. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. replaying conversations from years ago, trying to figure out which memories were lies. And then, out of nowhere, she showed up at the apartment at midnight. No warning, no text, just pounding on the door. When I opened it, she looked completely wrecked. Crying, mascara smeared everywhere, saying she'd made a horrible mistake. And against all logic, against every warning sign in my body, part of me still wanted to believe her. I let her in. I know some people reading this are probably already frustrated with me, and honestly, fair enough. Looking back, I'm frustrated with myself too. But when you spend over a decade loving someone, your brain doesn't just switch that off overnight. Even after everything, some stupid part of me still wanted an explanation that would magically make this hurt less. She sat on the couch crying for almost 20 minutes before she could even talk properly. And for a second, she sounded sincere. She said she felt lost. Said she hated herself for what she'd done. Said the affair started because she liked the attention and then spiraled into something she couldn't control. I asked if she loved him. This time she immediately said no. Too immediately. Then she grabbed my hand and told me she wanted to fix our marriage. Therapy, honesty, starting over, all the usual things people say when they're terrified of consequences. And I almost believed her, until her phone buzzed. I'm not even joking. Right there on the couch, in the middle of her emotional speech, her phone lit up with a message preview from Eric. "Are you still coming tonight?" The silence after that notification appeared was unreal. She snatched the phone so fast it practically flew off the cushion. Then she started stammering. "It's not what it looks like. I was going to end things. I just needed closure." Closure. At midnight, while sitting in her husband's apartment begging for another chance. I remember feeling this weird calm come over me, like my body finally got too exhausted to keep panicking. So I asked her one simple question. "If I hadn't seen that message, would you have gone?" And she didn't answer. That was the answer. I told her to leave again, this time quietly. No yelling, no dramatic speech. I just suddenly understood something I'd been resisting for weeks. She wasn't sorry because she hurt me. She was sorry because her double life collapsed. And the second I stopped hoping for the old her to come back, I realized something terrifying. I don't think that version of her ever actually existed. She cried harder after that, begging, apologizing, saying she was scared to lose me. But it sounded different now. Hollow, desperate. Before she left, she turned around at the door and said, "You're really going to throw us away over one mistake?" One mistake. I almost laughed. People don't accidentally lie every day for 8 months. They don't accidentally book hotels. They don't accidentally drain shared savings accounts. That's not one mistake. That's a lifestyle built on choices. After that night, something in me finally hardened. Not in a dramatic alpha male revenge way like people online fantasize about. Honestly, I mostly just felt exhausted, like my emotions had burned themselves out. The next morning I called a lawyer. Even typing that sentence still feels surreal. I used to be one of those people who thought divorce only happened to other couples. You know, couples who screamed constantly or obviously hated each other. Meanwhile, we were posting vacation photos 3 months earlier like everything was normal. The lawyer was calm, professional, almost painfully practical. She asked me questions about finances, property, shared accounts, timelines. And then she asked, "Do you believe your wife will be honest during this process?" I actually laughed out loud. That was apparently enough of an answer. Turns out the missing money situation was even worse than I thought. Some of the withdrawals lined up with hotel stays and trips she took with Eric. So while I was working overtime trying to stabilize our finances last winter, she was literally spending our savings on another man. I cannot describe the humiliation of realizing that. At the same time, my wife kept swinging wildly between personalities depending on the day. One morning she'd send paragraphs about loving me and wanting therapy. That same night she'd text, "You're not innocent either." Then when I asked what that even meant, she brought up random things from years ago. Forgetting anniversaries, working too much, not complimenting her enough. being emotionally unavailable. And look, I'm not pretending I was a perfect husband. I definitely wasn't. I got distracted by work. I shut down during conflict sometimes. But none of that forced her to cheat. That distinction became really important for me mentally. Because for weeks I kept trying to calculate whether I somehow deserved this. Trauma does weird things to your brain. You start bargaining with reality. Thinking, if I had just been better, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But eventually I realized faithful people communicate unhappiness. They don't build secret relationships behind your back for months. Then came another twist I genuinely didn't expect. Eric contacted me directly, not to apologize, to compare stories. Apparently my wife had been telling him that I was controlling, emotionally abusive, and refusing to let her leave the marriage. According to him, she painted herself as trapped and terrified of me. I was stunned. This man literally sent screenshots because even he had started realizing her stories didn't line up anymore. And buried in those screenshots was one message that made my stomach drop. I just need to keep him calm until the divorce stuff is figured out. Not husband, not partner, not someone she loved. Just him. Problem to manage. That message broke whatever was left of me emotionally. Not because it was the cruelest thing she'd done. Honestly, by that point the bar was in hell. But because it stripped away the last illusion that our relationship had still meant something to her near the end. I started therapy a week later because I genuinely wasn't functioning anymore. I couldn't focus at work. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't even sit through a movie without my brain drifting back into obsessive replay mode. My therapist said something during our second session that hit me hard. Betrayal trauma often makes people rewrite themselves as the villain because it feels safer than accepting they were deceived. That sentence honestly explained my entire mental state. Because if this was somehow my fault, then at least the world still made sense. At least there'd be a reason. Accepting that someone can look you in the eyes every day while lying to you for months? That's harder. Meanwhile, my wife kept escalating things. She'd alternate between begging me to come home, accusing me of ruining her life, pretending nothing serious happened, and then randomly acting furious that I turned people against her. One night she called me crying at 2 a.m. saying she missed me. The next afternoon I found out she'd spent that same night with Eric. At that point it almost became absurd. Like I was trapped in some psychological thriller written by someone who hated me personally. Then another bomb exploded. Her sister called again. Apparently my wife had told her family I cheated. Yep. According to the story she was spreading now, my emotional distance pushed her into a confusing friendship after discovering I'd supposedly been unfaithful first. None of it was true. And the scary thing? Some people believed her. That messed me up badly because I realized something ugly. When someone lies casually for long enough, they get very good at sounding believable. Suddenly I understood why I doubted myself for years. She could twist reality in real time without even flinching. I started digging through old memories again after that, and noticed a pattern I'd ignored forever. Every conflict somehow ended with her becoming the victim. If she insulted me, it was because I provoked her. If she lied, it was because I was too controlling. If she cheated, it was because she felt lonely. Nothing was ever fully her responsibility. And honestly, that realization hurt almost as much as the affair itself. Because I started seeing how long I'd been shrinking myself just to keep the peace. About a month into the separation, I made the mistake of meeting her for coffee. Everyone told me not to. My therapist literally said, "Be careful not to confuse familiarity with safety." Turns out that was excellent advice. She texted saying she wanted a mature conversation without fighting. Claimed she'd been reflecting on everything and wanted to take accountability. So against my better judgment, I agreed. The second I saw her sitting there waiting for me, my chest tightened. It was weird how normal she looked. Same jacket. Same nervous habit of tapping her fingernails against the coffee cup. For a few minutes, it almost felt like our old life. Then she started talking. At first, she sounded calm and remorseful. Said she knew she'd hurt me deeply. Said she was ashamed of the lies. But slowly, the conversation shifted. Suddenly, she was talking about how unhappy she'd been for years. How I never truly saw her. How she felt emotionally abandoned. And again, I'm not saying marriages don't have problems. Ours definitely did. But there's something deeply disturbing about listening to someone carefully reconstruct a moral justification for betraying you. Then she dropped another surprise. She admitted she was still seeing Eric. Not officially dating him, apparently. Just figuring things out. I actually stared at her for a second because I genuinely couldn't process the audacity. This woman spent weeks crying, begging for reconciliation, saying I was the love of her life, while actively continuing the affair the entire time. When I pointed that out, she got irritated and said, "It's complicated." No, cheating is complicated. Lying is complicated. But continuing the relationship after destroying your marriage? That's a decision. Then came the part that finally killed any lingering hope I had left. She looked me straight in the face and asked, "Can't we just move past this eventually? Move past this." Like she forgot I'd spent the last month barely sleeping while she bounced between me and another guy trying to keep whichever option felt safer. I remember realizing during that conversation that she genuinely did not understand the depth of damage she caused. Not really. She understood consequences. She understood discomfort. She understood fear of losing stability. But empathy? Actual empathy for what this did to another human being. I'm not sure it was there. When I got up to leave, she suddenly panicked, started crying again, grabbing my sleeve asking if this was really the end. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't feel confused. I just felt tired. After that coffee, I stopped meeting her entirely. No more closure talks. No more late-night calls. No more trying to decode whatever version of the truth she was offering that day. I went full no contact except for legal communication. And honestly, that's when things got even messier in a different way. She didn't take it well. At all. First, it was messages like, "You're punishing me. I'm not your enemy. You're being cruel." Then it escalated to longer emails where she tried to rewrite the entire timeline of our relationship again. This time framing herself as someone who had been emotionally starved and pushed into survival mode. At one point, she even wrote that I abandoned her emotionally first, which is wild considering she was actively living a double life. Meanwhile, Eric started drifting out of the picture too. He reached out one last time to say he couldn't do this anymore, after realizing she was still trying to keep both of us emotionally attached. According to him, she was telling him I was almost gone, while telling me he was just a mistake she was ending. So she wasn't just lying to us. She was actively managing two collapsing narratives at the same time. Around this point, I started noticing something unexpected in myself. The anger began fading. Not because I forgave her, I definitely didn't, but because constant anger is exhausting. It burns you out faster than sadness. What replaced it was clarity. Cold, uncomfortable clarity. I stopped asking, why did she do this? And started asking, why did I stay so long in something that made me feel this way? That question hurt in a different way. Because the answer wasn't dramatic. It was slow. It was me normalizing disrespect in small doses. It was me explaining away inconsistencies. It was me prioritizing stability over honesty. It was me hoping things would eventually go back to how they were. They never were. Then one day I got a final message from her that didn't try to defend anything. Just, "I lost you because I couldn't stop lying." No excuses. No rewriting. No blame shifting. For a second I thought maybe that was the closest thing to truth she'd ever said. But even then, it came too late to matter. Because by then, I wasn't the same person she started this with. And I wasn't going back. The divorce process officially started after that. And I won't romanticize it, it was still ugly. Paperwork, back and forth emails, arguments through lawyers instead of conversations. Every step felt like dismantling a life I didn't fully realize I was still emotionally attached to. She didn't sign quickly either. At first she stalled. Then she tried to negotiate things that had nothing to do with feelings. Splitting assets, delaying filings, reconsidering terms. It was like she was trying to regain control of a situation that had already slipped out of her hands. My lawyer told me something blunt during that phase. People like this often don't accept loss easily. Expect inconsistency. She was right. Some days my wife would agree to everything calmly, even politely. Other days she'd accuse me of destroying her future and refusing to forgive a mistake. At one point she even tried to bring Eric into it legally, claiming he manipulated her during a vulnerable period. The irony of that was almost unbelievable considering I had screenshots of her actively coordinating both relationships. But the most unexpected part wasn't the legal mess. It was what happened inside me during all of it. Slowly, the emotional chaos started settling into something more stable. Not peace exactly, more like distance. Like I was finally observing my own life instead of drowning inside it. I stopped checking my phone every hour expecting another message from her. I stopped rereading old conversations trying to find hidden meaning. I stopped mentally arguing with someone who wasn't even in the room anymore. And then came a strange moment of realization. One evening I was cleaning the apartment, just random normal stuff like dishes and laundry, and I suddenly noticed I hadn't thought about what she was doing that day. Not once. That used to dominate my entire mental space. Now it didn't even come up. That's when it hit me. Healing doesn't feel like a breakthrough moment. It feels like absence. The absence of constant anxiety. The absence of second-guessing yourself. The absence of living in someone else's emotional weather. Around the same time, I started rebuilding my routine. Simple things first. Gym. Walking. Cooking actual meals instead of surviving on takeout and stress. Friends started coming back into the picture more consistently too. Not the "we were worried about you" kind of visits anymore, but normal hangouts where I wasn't the central topic of conversation. And for the first time in a long time, I started feeling like I was a person again, not just a reaction to what had happened to me. Then one last unexpected thing happened. A letter arrived from her. The letter from her wasn't what I expected. I thought it would be another attempt to justify things or rewrite the story again. That had been her pattern for months. Different versions of the same reality depending on what she needed at the moment. But this one was quieter. No accusations. No blame. No dramatic language. Just her handwriting on plain paper. She said she wasn't writing to ask for anything. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Not even a response. She said she finally understood that she had spent so long avoiding responsibility that she had lost the ability to be honest with anyone, including herself. She admitted she'd been scared of being ordinary, scared of being unseen, and that instead of dealing with that in a healthy way, she built a life of constant validation and secrecy. There was one line that stood out. I kept trying to feel important to other people because I didn't know how to feel okay by myself. That part, I didn't feel anger reading, just distance, because it explained things without excusing them. She also wrote that she had started therapy herself and had told her therapist everything, not just about me but about the pattern before me too. The previous affair, the lying, the need for attention that kept escalating every time she got away with something. She didn't ask me to believe her. She said she understood if I didn't. And then she ended it with something I didn't expect at all. If I ever really loved you in a way that mattered, it's in letting you stop being hurt by me. No dramatic goodbye. No, maybe one day. Nothing like that. Just release. I sat with that letter for a long time. Not because it changed anything legally or practically, but because it was the first time I felt like I wasn't being pulled into a conversation I didn't want to have anymore. I didn't reply. I put it in a drawer and left it there. And for the first time since everything started, I didn't feel like I owed the story any more energy. But that still wasn't the end. Because a few weeks later, I ran into someone I didn't expect. It happened completely by accident. I was at a small grocery store near my place, just grabbing basic stuff. Nothing unusual, nothing that would stick in my memory. Until I turned down the aisle and saw Eric. At first, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked different in person than in the photos, more tired, less confident. Like someone who had also been through something that stripped a bit of the illusion away. He noticed me at the same time. We just stood there for a second. No aggression, no tension. Just this awkward recognition between two people who had been orbiting the same chaos without ever actually meeting. Then he said something unexpected. I didn't know what you looked like until now. That almost made me laugh, considering how deeply our lives had been entangled. We ended up stepping outside to talk. Not because we were friends. Not because we suddenly understood each other. But because there was something weirdly necessary about putting a real face to everything that had happened. He told me he had ended things with her for good. Said it wasn't just about me, it was about realizing the pattern. The lying. The emotional manipulation. The way she would shift narratives depending on who she was talking to. He said, I thought I was the exception. Turns out I was just part of the rotation. That line stuck with me, because that's what it was. Not a love triangle. A cycle. He also admitted something I didn't expect. He had started questioning his own judgment too. Wondering why he ignored inconsistencies. Why he believed explanations that didn't fully add up. And for a moment, I realized something uncomfortable but grounding. I wasn't the only one who had been misled. But I was the only one who stayed long enough to lose myself in it. Before we left, he apologized. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just a simple acknowledgement that he had been part of something that caused real damage. I didn't really know what to say, so I just nodded. We went our separate ways. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because seeing him didn't bring closure. It brought something else. Perspective. After that encounter, everything finally started to settle in a way I didn't expect. Not dramatically. No sudden emotional breakthrough. More like reality just stopped shifting under my feet every day. I stopped replaying conversations with her in my head, trying to decode hidden meanings. I stopped feeling like there was some final explanation I still hadn't uncovered. There wasn't. It was just what it was. A long series of choices that I had tried too hard to interpret as something else. My days became normal again. And weirdly, normal felt unfamiliar at first. Waking up without immediately checking my phone for crisis messages. Going to work without feeling like I was carrying a second life in my head. Eating meals without that constant knot in my stomach. Therapy helped, but not in the movie sense where everything suddenly makes sense. It was slower. More like learning how to notice my own thoughts without getting swallowed by them. One session, my therapist asked me, "What part of this do you still feel responsible for?" And I surprised myself by answering honestly, staying as long as I did. She nodded and said something I've kept with me since. Staying too long is a human response. It usually comes from hope, not weakness. That didn't erase anything, but it reframed it enough that I stopped treating myself like I was stupid for not leaving sooner. Meanwhile, my ex-wife faded into a more distant presence in my life. Not emotionally at first, practically. The legal process eventually finalized. Property divided. Accounts separated. Everything turned into paperwork and signatures and final confirmations that our lives were no longer legally connected. The last time I saw her in person was at a short administrative meeting. She looked different again. Not dramatically, just less sharp. Like the version of her that could keep multiple narratives going at once wasn't fully active anymore. We didn't argue. We didn't even really talk. At one point she almost said something, I could tell. But she stopped herself. And that was it. We signed the final documents and left in opposite directions. On the way home, I remember sitting on the bus thinking about how anticlimactic endings actually are. No music. No closure speech. No emotional resolution moment. Just life continuing forward whether you feel ready or not. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel terrifying. Felt like space. Space I didn't realize I needed. A few months after everything legally ended, something strange happened. I stopped feeling like my life was defined by what she did. That might sound obvious, but when you're in it, it really isn't. For a long time, every decision I made was still indirectly shaped by her actions. Where I lived, how I slept, even how I reacted to normal stress. And then one day I realized I hadn't thought about her in an entire day. Not avoided the thought. Not pushed it away. Just didn't come up. That scared me a little, actually, because part of me had gotten used to carrying it. Like if I wasn't actively processing the betrayal, I was somehow forgetting it or worse, letting it win. But my therapist reframed that too. She said, "You're not required to keep the wound open for it to have mattered." That stuck with me more than anything else from therapy. Around that time, I started rebuilding things I didn't even realize I had dropped. I changed apartments. Not because I was trying to escape memories, but because the old place had turned into a museum of a life that no longer existed. Every corner had some version of us attached to it. The new place was smaller, quieter, neutral. No history, just a reset. Work started feeling manageable again. Friends stopped treating me like something fragile. The conversations stopped circling back to her all the time, which helped more than I expected. And emotionally, I started noticing something new. Not happiness exactly, but stability without anxiety underneath it. No scanning conversations for lies. No second-guessing tone shifts. No mental calculations about what was real. Just present time. Then, one night, I got a message from an unknown number. It wasn't her. It was Eric again. And this time, what he sent wasn't about drama or accusations. It was a short message that simply said, "I thought you should know. She's doing it again." I stared at it for a long time without replying. Not because I was shocked, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel pulled back into the cycle. I just felt done. And I realized something I probably should have understood a long time ago. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you eventually stop needing from them. And that was the first time I didn't feel like I was surviving the story anymore. I felt like I was finally outside of it,